पॉलिसी बाजार 1 करोड़ का हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 550 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Shivani Singh. 5 Indian Air Force personnel have died after an AN-32 transport aircraft crashed at the Air Force Station in Jorhat, Assam. The co-pilot has survived the crash and is currently under treatment. The Indian Air Force says that it deeply regrets the loss and stands with the bereaved families in this hour of grief. The aircraft was reportedly flying from Arunachal Pradesh to Jorhat when it went down inside the airbase premises. The deceased includes Squadron Leader Prashant Singh, Flight Lieutenant Shubham Kumar, Sergeant Jitendra Sharma, Agniveer Vayu Khemaram Kumawat and Agniveer Vayu Danish Alam. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has expressed deep anguish and paid tribute to the fallen air warriors. The IAF has ordered a court of inquiry to determine the cause of the crash, while emergency response teams had rushed to the site immediately after the incident. Now, the tragic AN-32 crash in Jorhat is not a standalone incident. In fact, a similar crash occurred 7 years ago after taking off from the same Air Force base. Let's take a look at some of the details and some of the AN-32 crashes in India. We'll obviously give you a background as to why we're bringing these crashes to light, because the AN-32 is a very important aircraft for the Indian Air Force. It's the workhorse of this force. So let's look at some past AN-32 crashes in India. March 17, 1999, in Dwarka and Delhi, 18 IAF personnel and 3 civilians were killed in this crash. So this happened in 1999. On June 10th, 2009, we have Mechuka, Arunachal Pradesh, where 7 IAF crew members and 6 Indian Army personnel were unfortunately killed in a crash over there of AN-32. On July 22nd, 2016, over the Bay of Bengal, 17 IAF personnel, 2 Army personnel, 8 defence civilians, 1 Navy and 1 Coast Guard unfortunately were killed in this over the Bay of Bengal. On June 3rd, 2019, in Lipo in Arunachal Pradesh, 13 IAF personnel were killed in a crash after takeoff from Jorhat. So this was the latest that we got for you and we were talking about, and these are in fact some of the images of today's crash. This is 13 June 2026 in Jorhat, Assam. 5 IAF personnel killed in crash during landing. So obviously these are some of the details of these past incidents that have occurred, and we have been tracking and bringing this to you to understand what we are actually facing as a nation. To discuss this further, we have on the panel Major General Sudhakarji, Senior Geopolitical and Defence Expert, Wing Commander S. Sudhakaran, Defence Expert, Squadron Leader Deepthi Kala, who is a former IAF officer, and Group Captain UK Devka, who is also a former IAF officer. I welcome you all to this discussion. Unfortunately, we'll be discussing very tragic news that is in fact coming in from Assam. Let's start off this discussion with Major General Sudhakarji. I would in fact first like your observations regarding this tragic incident that has unfolded over there in Assam.
Yes, Shivani, good evening. I hope I am audible. At the very outset, I extend my condolences to the demise of the soldiers in service, and pray to God for the departed soul to rest in peace and give strength to the bereaved families. And having said that, it's a very unfortunate thing that has happened, and these are the combat challenges people don't get to know. So we live by the day. Nobody knows that whether one would be alive next moment or not. These are the unpredictable requirements of all the 3 services. So that's why they always take pride in saying that this is the only organization. You always take a pledge unto your death for the national security. No other organization does this. So having said that, I would say this is a white horse, they call it, as far as the AN-32, and it came sometime in 1984. It has proven all the requirements of a tactical airlift, and I myself, I have been cut off in very extremely high altitude areas, and N-32 is one which came to our rescue at most critical juncture, whether it was Siachen Glacier or in the eastern sector towards Tawang or in the eastern Ladakh. And I have been myself at DBO, and N-32 is to bring us a fresh air of, breath of fresh air whenever we spotted after a long gap at DBO. So this is that aircraft which came from USSR in 1984, and since then, despite all challenges, and I have seen it operating in most extreme kind of challenges. When I was in uniform dealing with special ops, be it in the Andamans or in the immediate neighborhood. This is the most credible and reliable and a kind of a robust frame which is to actually lift our tactical loads. It has got a huge capacity of paratroopers. I've flown with them, good about almost 40 to 50 of them. They used to come, they used to airdrop in most unforgiving kind of terrain and weather conditions. And there have been very serious mishaps, very serious mishaps. But given the size and the tactical airlift capability and the proven track record, I don't think there is any aircraft which is of its standard. And now we have started looking out for alternatives to C295 from Spain, Airbus. And but still, we have a couple of years left. We have given an extended kind of a stimulus to the life of this aircraft. And I hope and pray that this doesn't experience this kind of disasters or challenges that it faced on the air tarmac of Jorhat Airfield, which is actually, the investigation is going to bring out the truth as to what had gone wrong and how did it happen. It broke up into two pieces. All these details will come out only after the investigation by the aviation department goes through.
Absolutely, General. In fact, let me also rope in Wing Commander Sudhakaran. Sir, in no way am I speculating or, putting, facts to the fore, but I want to understand this is an aging fleet. Firstly, I want to know the requirements for maintenance for the technical perspective of this entire AN-32. And I also want to understand, is it time now? Should there be a sense of urgency in the procurement of the C295s or the medium transport aircrafts going forward?
See, whenever we have an accident, we get into these kind of talks, and it's certainly not going to come tomorrow. Having said that, my deepest condolences to the family members of the 5 air warriors who have given their ultimate sacrifice. Today is one another day wherein we have lost a lot of our brethren. That explains the kind of harsh conditions that military service demands. People often don't understand. They tell, very casually that there is no war. But it's an everyday existence. When you don't go back home, that's when you realize your day has ended today. And that's true for most air warriors who don the uniform. And today, unfortunately, 5 of them don't go back home. Having said that, I have to tell you that AN-32, I've been in a couple of bases where this aircraft was stationed. In fact, today as I speak to you, Air Force Station Yelahanka is just by our side. I see this take off day in, day out. It has flown millions of sorties. And I'll have to tell your viewers that this was customized for Indian conditions. That's how that became the workhorse of Indian Air Force. The kind of maintenance standards that the Indian Air Force maintains is of very high standard. But then, given that it may be, these are things that we have to face. And accidents don't happen just like that. The Swiss cheese model, as we very famously say, it is the matching of multiple layers that leads to an accident. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess as to why it happened today, but then it has happened. and there will be another court of inquiry. They will come with fresh findings, and those findings will find their way into not only the maintenance of AN-32 fleet, but the operations in Jorhat, in the entire Northeast, and for other relevant fleets as well. That's how Indian Air Force takes it. That's how it goes about doing its business. Having been in service for over 2.5 decades, I know that too well. So I don't have any reasons to suspect that it was a technical issue or a maintenance related issue. But then, yes, when accidents happen, we need to look at all aspects. And my brethren in uniform serving today are more than competent to do that, and I'm pretty sure that we will get the report soon. Having said that, I will once again pay my condolences, and that's all I have to say.
Absolutely. In fact, let me also rope in Group Captain UK Devnath, because one thing that's also coming to the fore, because there are a lot of speculation going on. There are a lot of reports also reporting about the weather conditions, about how it was to land over there. So, Group Captain Devnath, I want to understand from you, since you've operated in very similar environments, how difficult was the terrain? Was the landing, something that was on a scale of how difficult it can be?
Shivani, definitely a very sad accident. Condolences. Shivani, what happens that Indian Air Force is used to operate in extreme weather conditions. Our pilots are trained to operate in bad weather, poor visibility, rain, thunderstorm, cloudy condition, dust storm. But what happens, there is a way by which we grade our pilots. We grade our pilots as master green, green. So these ratings are given. In present case, I am very sure the captain of the aircraft was 100%, he was a master green, which is the highest rating for instrument flying rating for an Indian Air Force pilot. Shivani, what happens now? It is say month of June. By 13 June, the monsoons do arrive in Assam, and very often it happens that early morning or late in the evening, clouds come down, they descend down, they do descend down to very low altitude. Base of the cloud may be just about 500 feet, 300 feet above ground. Our pilots are trained to take off and land in such a condition. Sometimes there are local storm phenomena. Suddenly a thunderstorm will come, which was not as visible on to naked eye or even on radar just about 20 minutes ago. It will come from somewhere. A wind speed will pick up to 100 km per hour. There will be heavy wind gusts. Wind will change direction suddenly, left to right, right to left. Most important, there will be vertically updraft and vertically downdraft. Pilots are trained to recognize these kind of weather situations, and accordingly they plan their takeoff and landing. Shivani, what exactly happened is difficult to tell right now. But Jorhat has a instrument landing system. The pilots are trained to land on instrument landing system. But the instrument landing system, which is in Jorhat, that guides the pilot towards the runway. So as the pilot is approaching 4 km, 3 km, 2 km, somewhere around 2 km, the pilot has to visually sight the runway and then land. And if we are talking about vertical altitude, as his aircraft is descending from 600 feet down to 500 feet, down to 400 feet, somewhere around 300 feet or 200 feet, the pilot has to visually acquire the runway and then land. Landing has to be done manually by the pilot. So sometimes it may happen that there is a very severe test of the skill of the pilot. So many times, because of weather, pilots do operate at the extreme envelope limits of their professional training. Yes, Shivani?
Right. In fact, let me also rope in Squadron Leader Deepthi Kala into this discussion. Ma'am, I want to understand, a court of inquiry obviously has been ordered, and it will ascertain as to what went wrong and why the crash actually occurred. And unfortunately, we lost those 5 IAF personnel. But from your perspective, do you believe that we should now look towards modernization?
Good evening, Shivani, and good evening to the co-panelists, seniors. Indeed, first of all, my condolences to the families and to the souls that have departed and they sacrificed their life for the nation. Shivani, as Sir has already said, in these circumstances, the first question that we raise against any service, be it Army, Indian Navy, or Indian Air Force, is that we start to question what is existing and should we look out for modernization. However, my point to this is, Shivani, to all the listeners would be, it was a very, see, what we don't look at when we look at an aircraft, we don't look at the age of the aircraft. We have aircraft ranging from 35 years to 42 years now. However, what we look at is the airworthiness of the aircraft. And I'm sure you can see from the data itself, if the last crash had occurred 7 years ago, it's a huge gap. I'm not saying that see, it's a machine ultimately, and crashes would happen, and that's what the Indian military forces are meant for. Right. However, it doesn't mean that we immediately look for modernization. Yes, the efforts are being made. We are acquiring aircraft, and in future, more aircrafts are going to come. However, if the aircraft has flown in the air, it means that the crew has decided and has maintained the aircraft to the airworthiness that it could do that sortie and come back, fulfill its mission and come back. However, in an unfortunate circumstance like this, the mishap has happened. Now, of course, the real reasons are going to come when the flight data recorders are going to be tested and when the inquiry will be fulfilled. But however, in Jorhat is not an extreme difficult airland. The landing is not that extremely difficult. However, as Sir said, the circumstances in the northeast, I have served in Bagdogra, the circumstances in northeast are so violent that you don't get to know them even 15-20 minutes before. So weather could be a reason, bird hit could be a reason. During the landing, it's a turboprop engine. So anything going wrong with the engine, because as of now, the information is that it happened during the landing, which means the aircraft has done its sortie. So probably any electronic or engine failure or anything could have happened in such a short span of time. The avionics could have gone wrong, that it has happened. Now, of course, the real reason is going to come out. However, immediately, I don't think so. This is the right time to question how we are maintaining the aircraft. Modernization is going to happen. It is in the process. Everybody from top to bottom is taking care of that. And if the aircraft has flown its mission, it was airworthy to take on and fulfill the mission that to carry.
Okay, so I concur with with all the panelists that we are not questioning the airworthiness of the aircraft in Jorhat, in Assam over there that met with the crash. But overall, as a scenario, General Sudhakarji, I want to then understand from you. Obviously, there is a high rate of sorties that needs to be maintained in that kind of an operational region, and we have, as per open sources, around 100 such AN-32 aircrafts. They need to constantly be on such sorties. What's next for the Indian Air Force so that they can prevent such tragedies from happening again, sir?
Yeah, Shivani, I'm very fortunate to have colleagues from the Air Force, those who are domain experts, and they have the better of the say on the subject. But having served in Arunachal Pradesh more than one tenure, I can say that the terrain and the climatic conditions in Arunachal Pradesh are extremely challenging. You have very narrow hill slopes. The valleys are very narrow. The turbulence is unpredictable. That's why generally the flights are in the morning hours, early morning hours. And if it goes beyond the timeline of 9 o'clock in the morning, then you are inviting a lot of trouble. I have flown in a helicopter, and suddenly the nose started diving downwards. So we are catching each other's hand, not knowing whether we'll come back alive or not, but suddenly it stabilized. Those kind of unpredictable factors happen. After all, you are flying a machine, like Dipti has very rightly covered, so as the very distinguished panelist Sudhakar and Group Captain Dev. The fact is that questioning should not be taken on an emotional angle. Questioning is investigation. We need to find out so that these kind of occurrences are prevented in future. Because N-32, like Sudhakar, he said that it is the white horse of Air Force. In fact, they have hands-on experience, so I'm nobody to comment on the expertise. But the fact remains that for me as an infantryman, I used to look up into the sky when the aircraft is going to come. We are cut off without any ration. And N-32 came and spread. It is to be the RC contours of Tawang, Jimitang sector. They came and gave us the ration. We are totally lost. Same is the case with Siachen Glacier. So for us, it is a survival lifeline. And our Air Force brothers, they actually come to our rescue in most critical junctures, when everything else is cut off. But the issue needs to be highlighted is here is an aircraft which has completed its mission, all was well, they have flown well, they have come and landed on the tarmac. On the tarmac, something happens and the aircraft, it breaks into two pieces. This is something very, very unusual, which to a layman like me is catching my attention. We need to investigate. Not that we are trying to pinpoint or bring down anyone. Idea of aim behind any investigation is to remedy that so that we prevent its recurrence in future. Now, modernization that you actually hinted in your question is, yes, India is going by leaps and bounds in 2021. We have gone in for signing with Spain the Airbus C295
C295.
is already under assemblies. 16 of them, I think, they have come on a fly-away mode. And the remaining 40, total 46, if I respect my memory, 56 have been contracted. They are going to be produced. 16 they are going to come in the flyaway mode, and 40 are going to be assembled somewhere in Gujarat, I think Vadodara. This is basically with an aim to replace our aging fleet of Avro. Avro, in any case, is dying out very fast. But N-32, even with the current inventory of 100 aircrafts, that becomes the mainstay of the tactical airlift. And in places like Siachen Glacier and Arunachal Pradesh, and this incidentally had flown to Mechuka, if I'm not wrong, and to fly to Mechuka and come back. This terrain, our Air Force brothers and the lady would be knowing, they must have some experience on flying over this terrain. It is most unpredictable and very, very deceptive. Weather suddenly packs up, though clouds come from nowhere over Sela Pass. I have witnessed to Pema Khandu's father, Dorji Khandu's sudden disappearance of helicopter. I was the brigade commander at that time. So these are challenging assignments.
Absolutely.
And brothers and sisters are doing a phenomenal job in Air Force. Kudos to them. And my condolences once again to the deceased souls. And may this incident or accident, embolden our colleagues in the Air Force, and may them be charged up again to face these challenges and bring pride and glory to the nation as they have been doing always.
Absolutely. Wing Commander Sudhakaran, we've seen, we have a co-pilot who has survived the entire tragic air crash, currently under medical treatment. A court of inquiry has obviously been ordered. His statement will be of vital importance as to what went wrong. I want to understand from you then, what's the biggest takeaway from this tragic air crash for the IAF, for the country?
It would be not proper for me to comment on this, specifically sitting in Bangalore on what had happened in Jorhat.
Yeah.
That would be absolutely improper for the training that I received and for the service that I did. So I wouldn't want to do that. But having said that, let me tell you, this aircraft landed in the highest terrain, Daulat Beg Odi. That's a record against this aircraft. That's the testament that this aircraft has, and it has not seen far too many aircrafts for the kind of sorties that it has flown. That is number one. Number two is the Indian Air Force maintains a very strict regimen of maintenance. The kind of turnaround servicing schedules that they maintain, the kind of 50 hours, 100 hours, and the various other servicing that they maintain. I have personally served in one of these bases. I've seen it from very close quarters. It's of very high standard, and that is reflective on the fact that there are far less accidents proportionate to the kind of sorties that it has done. So there is no reason for us to question the platform. Yes, human errors do happen. And sometimes, as is rightly pointed out, the weather conditions in the Northeast is very, very unforgiving. The moment you cross Bagdogra and then go further east, the weather comes, it changes so abruptly that you don't know what happens. In fact, I was on a couple of times stranded because we just landed the aircrafts. When it goes on a courier service, it goes to various bases, and once it lands, if the weather is not good, it doesn't take off, and sometimes it doesn't take off for maybe a couple of days together because of adverse weather conditions. So these things are known to us. The pilots are trained for it, as Group Captain Devnath has rightly brought out. Just because one accident has happened today, it is not right for us to challenge the procedures or the platform. Okay. Because that's not how forces operate. Forces operate. Of course, we operate on reliability. We don't, if there is a slight doubt on its reliability, we don't take it to air, or we don't take it for operations, even if it is a four-wheeler on the road. The roadworthiness of it is ascertained. So for an aircraft, the airworthiness is at the highest level. In fact, while we train in the academy, we are trained not to take shortcuts. If there is a shorter path that is available, we are groomed, in such a way that we are asked to avoid taking shortcuts, and that is the kind of practice that we follow in our professional life. So I have no doubts whatsoever that the aircraft was airworthy. And see, it has happened at the stage wherein it was about to land. So which means it was a question of minutes. Now, what transpired exactly during the last few minutes, it can only be told by the investigators, who would have first-hand access to the flight data recorder and the various the weather specifically, because considering the fact that the weather can deteriorate very quickly, and a slight misjudgment in altitude, and it is also possible that the aircraft in itself, there are some known faults in the aircrafts wherein the altitude parameters get misjudged because of inclement weather conditions.
Right.
So there are multiple things that we need to look at. I think it's better that we wait for it. And today, all the best that we can do is pay our condolence and then pray for the departed souls.
All right. Thank you so much to all my panelists, General Sudhakar, Wing Commander Sudhakaran, Squadron Leader Deepthi Kala, and Group Captain Devnath, for your valuable perspective on this issue. With that, viewers, we are slipping into a short commercial.